Hello everybody and welcome to another Arkham Town Hall video with me and Daniel from Quick Learner. How's it going, Daniel?
Good. How are you? We haven't talked at all in the last 30 seconds.
No, we haven't. No, this is the first time I've asked you how you were doing today. If you don't know what a town hall is, it's basically like a podcast style. It's like very close to that. It's a discussion video, but it's called Town Hall because we're currently live on our Twitch channel where I stream Arkham every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain. So you should come watch. But chat's here, so chat is going to be inputting in on the conversation, asking questions that we're going to bounce off of, as well as also, just like taking their talking points if they have any as well. If they have that kind of stuff, we can add it to the conversation here. Our topic for today's Town Hall video is the idea of teching against a campaign. We have a little bit of a groundwork we need to lay down first before we can actually get to talking about this in further detail. But I think the place we're going to start is describing what teching is. Teching is just like what it's called in Arkham, and it carries over like most things in card games from the idea of Magic the Gathering, right? So in Magic the Gathering, when you build your deck for competitive play, you build something called a sideboard. 15 cards that are there to side into your deck between matches to have a better chance of countering your opponent's deck. So an example of this is in game one, you realize your opponent is playing a combo that you have disruption for. But rather than including that disruption in your starting deck, where if you did not play that up against that opponent, you would have like 4 dead cards in your deck, you could run like 3 of them in your sideboard. And then after game 1, that person beats you because of their combo, you get to bring in those cards for your games 2 and 3, where now you have a higher chance of beating that combo because you have those cards in your deck. But it doesn't mean that your deck always has those cards, so you can kind of just adapt your deck between based on what your opponent is playing. And it's the same sort of thing here in theory, right? This is something that you and I have actually talked about quite a bit on the channel here recently, which is the fact that don't get it twisted, understand that the game is your opponent. It's not trying to be nice. It's not trying to give you a good time. The rules design, like the how the game works, is attempting to give you a good time, but the scenarios themselves are your opponent and they're trying to beat you. So the idea of teching for campaigns or teching for scenarios is what gives you a better chance of beating your opponent, and it's kind of the exact same thing of what sideboarding is. And I see you pulled over a card that I think is like perfect for us to kind of just like start as the initial part of this conversation. Adaptable is kind of like the perfect sideboard card because you get to change your level 0 cards where there's a lot of really good tech cards. And this is actually something we refer to a lot as tech cards. I know I'm saying a lot right now, but this is just like the foundation of all this. We have these tech cards that we are able to bring in and then bring out as needed, and you don't have to spend any experience for it apart from the one experience that Adaptable has. I feel like I've talked a bunch. Why don't I throw something to you for this here? If
sure.
You have it.
So yeah, I kind of struggle with like maybe our big question, or I don't know if we're just discussing this in general or have some question to ask ourselves, and maybe we have some answers for now. It's like, is this like good for the game? Like what is the nature of teching as part of the game? And Adaptable, since you brought it up, is intended for this purpose, right? I think a lot of people talk about Adaptable in the sense of, well, if your deck didn't work out the way you thought it would have been in the scenario 1 because you're new to the game, you're new to this particular investigator, to the cards, and you feel like you want to switch out some cards because they just stunk. Well, people often say, sure, house rule that you can do this because you're just switch out a couple cards. But then a lot of veterans say, but that's what Adaptable is for, right? You have to spend 1 XP for that, and only rogues can do it. But the reality, I think, is that Adaptable is there not to fix holes in your deck. Yeah. It's to tech for different scenarios. And what's interesting about this game, about the campaign structure in general, is that not every scenario asks for the same thing, right? Every would say most scenarios have some kind of interesting challenge, some sticking point maybe, and it's going to be different from scenario to scenario. And a lot of decks are going to be really good in some scenarios, and then they'll struggle in the next one because what the campaign is asking for you to do is slightly different. But zooming out for a second, I think campaigns themselves often have recurring encounter cards, right? Enemies or treacheries that show up more than once, or maybe some kind of theme that you really need to be testing a particular skill across many scenarios. So that's like, to me, maybe a different discussion. They're related, right? But like, when we talk about, hey, you're going to be playing the Path to Carcosa versus you're playing the Forgotten Age, your deck initially, without teching for particular scenarios, might look different because you're teching for the campaign. So that's like, it's kind of interesting, like those two ideas. Like one is more about deck building from the get-go, about like, does my deck look different? Do I play a different investigator even in this campaign because I know that I need, you know, I'm going to play Rita or something in the Forgotten Age because I know agility is really good, right? Versus I'm not going to play some other investigator who's going to, you know, suck at all of those tests. So like, that's like, it's almost like teching for a campaign based on who you're playing, right? Versus the scenario thing is maybe choices you make at a lower level.
I think what you're describing is a very interesting thing to bounce to next, because there is a difference between like scenario tech and like specific targeted tech, scenario tech, or like specifically encounter set tech. So like an example of that, one that I'm going to just point to quickly without getting into much detail, is Brotherhood Cultist from Forgotten Age. He shows up 3 or 4 times, right? Depending on how things go. And a lot of people will tech for him for the campaign beyond the initial Forgotten Age tech, right? Because Forgotten Age kind of has its own, like you said, evasion matters, right? Like, or like high foot is rewarded for this one. And I think what's really interesting for that is, while we tech against the campaigns in the same way, without even done on purpose, I'd wager, the campaigns are teching against us. So an example, 2 examples on the top of my head, are Keimani is very good in the Forgotten Age, but Keimani is going to have struggles, unforeseen consequences in the Innsmouth Conspiracy, right? Likewise, Patrice Hathaway, she got an achievement in Hemlock Vale because that campaign basically counters her. So it's like, it's not really that the campaigns don't really like tech against us, they just counter it. And likewise, this happens a lot with Monterey Jack and Ursula Downs. You might find that they're just countered for a scenario because their abilities don't actually do anything. By scenario design, you're not moving that much. So
okay, let me ask you, so just that sort of very high level decision, do you play those investigators, like when you're deciding who I'm playing and you know that you're playing a particular campaign first, and say, you know what, they're gonna have a hard time in like 2 or 3 scenarios, why bother? I want to win this campaign. Why am I trying to play an investigator that I know the campaign hard counters at least sometimes? Or do you say, I'm not a baby, I'll play whoever I want?
Well, to answer your question, I'm bringing Ursula in Innsmouth Conspiracy for Eric's blind run. So on that scale, where it's like I don't get to use my ability for a scenario, I don't bother for that. But I'll be more inclined to not bring Patrice or Keimani into the scenario, into the campaigns where they have like a noted disadvantage, you know, because I think that those are actually very big disadvantages the 2 of them have there.
Yeah, I think it's hard for designers to make all campaigns, I mean, a variety of campaigns, right? They want to do that. They can't just make them all the same. But it's hard to make them where everyone is equally viable, or at least roughly in the same window of viability. And they knew that Patrice was just going to be annoying to play in Feast of Hemlock Vale, and they said, you know what? There's like 50 other investigators. Someone's going to have a hard time, right?
Yeah. I think it's actually to echo what you're saying, I think it's actually a bad design decision to not to like try to make it perfect for everybody. This is actually something that I've pointed to that I think has been really apparent in custom campaigns, where they've kind of just been designed to make everyone happy because they get more pressure to change it, right? Because the official campaigns, they can't change. There can be errata, right? But it's not like they send out Feast of Hemlock Vale for like feelers, and then someone's like, Patrice really sucks in this one, and they're like, okay, you're right, we'll get rid of that card, you know, like that kind of thing. That doesn't happen for the official stuff, and I think it's good to have those restrictions, because what it does is it allows when players can tech against campaigns and scenarios, that's also really strong. I think oh, sorry, you go.
As I say, so do you think that, I mean, just imagine, I'm sure there was someone who played Feast of Hemlock Vale blind with Patrice, and I don't know, like, I don't want them to have a bad time with a campaign just because the campaign like hard countered you and just made it your life kind of miserable. You know, because like I think the blind run is very important, given that probably a lot of people who play this game, not people who are like us, who are insane people, but they played the game once, right? They played a campaign maybe once or maybe twice, but they're not thinking about those sorts of things. The players, they're not thinking, oh, I guess I have to, you know, muscle through this campaign with an investigator who's like annoying the hell out of me because of that. But on the other hand, Patrice in her own campaign, Dream Eaters, has hidden cards, and they're also a pain in the ass. So
I mean, I feel like so to go on that, I feel like if someone has bought Dream Eaters and Hemlock, I mean, those two came out around the same time with the repackage, so like that could have happened, right? Like, yeah, I think it would be a feel bad for it, but I feel like it's like one of those things where like we look at the worst case scenario that could happen, and it's unlikely to happen multiple times, right? Like, how many times have you actually like drawn like Beyond the Veil and had that happen to? Because I think Beyond the Veil is another card that can hurt Patrice pretty bad. Maybe not as quick as the card in Hemlock, which we don't even actually have as a tech card, because I think you just don't tech for it. You just like don't run out of cards, right?
Right. Yeah. Captivating Gleam.
Because like that campaign tries to get cards from your hand by design. But I think a big thing too is that I think it's good when like, sorry, no, that's not. Let's scratch that point. What I originally want to say was when you have an investigator that's as weird as Patrice, you have to kind of like expect there to be unforeseen challenges that might appear. You're going to be affected differently, because like if everybody else's max hand size is 8 and yours is 5, they're not going to like not print hand size reduction cards. Those are going to happen, and they're going to hit you more than other people, right? Yeah.
We saw that when we played together on a campaign that's probably not released here yet.
Yeah, our sealed run. Yeah, it really got you in interesting ways, which I think was very interesting. So I want to take a little zoom in here on Path to Carcosa, because I think Path to Carcosa is a great example of the difference between teching for a campaign and teching for a scenario, right? So what do you think? What do people generally think of for Path to Carcosa? There's not too much to tech against in the campaign except for horror, right?
Horror. Yeah.
So people generally say horror healing is good in Path to Carcosa. But I don't know if you agree, but to me, that statement is not exactly like tech. It's not strong enough. It's good, and you can survive Carcosa without healing horror, right? But it does give you a more comfortable excursion through it, right?
Yeah. I guess I would say that, so I agree with you in principle, because the campaign itself lets you know, right, that having horror on you is bad. And then I think it does a really nice job of later on, you know, rewarding, did you bring healing or not? So I think it's like a theme of the campaign, but I think it's not something that I tech for in the initial deck build. If it's getting to be a problem later, then I start to be concerned about it, but it's not something that immediately requires a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, so and like that's where it's very different than Magic the Gathering sideboard, because you only have you have to win 2 of 3 matches to beat your opponent most of the time, right? In Arkham Horror, you actually have 8 shots to face this opponent, and you have to beat, well, technically almost all of them, but really only the last 2 matter for Path to Carcosa, right?
Right.
So it's like one of those things where you can be a little bit more adaptable, and to me, that's kind of less teching, but more like changing to the situation that's happening. Because if you just crush it and you actually end up not needing horror healing, the recommendation was kind of moot, right?
And they give you ways to heal horror in that final scenario anyway, so it's not. It's of anything that we're probably going to talk about, it's the weakest one that you might need to think about.
Yeah. And then we compare it to, I'm going to skip over these 2 for now, but let's talk about Unspeakable Oath, where you have to get out of this scenario or you're cooked, right? And I always bring mass movement or I'm out of here for this scenario, like pretty much every time I play it. And to me, that is the big difference between teching for a campaign, which I think is like smaller gradual value, versus teching for a scenario where it's how do I win this scenario or minimize the risks of the scenario as much as possible? Because then as soon as this scenario is done, I remove those cards from my deck, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of like the second part of tech, right? Where you as soon as you're done with it, it's gone.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing, that while there might be more than one scenario that has like the Brotherhood cultists, by and large, I think people talk about scenario tech for like a one-off thing, that this is the scenario where you need to do something and you bring in a card for it, and then afterwards it did its job. See ya. So yeah, those do feel kind of different. At some point, do we want to talk about like this in particular? Like this is like maybe one of the strongest reasons to tech for something.
Mm-hmm. I think so. To not die.
Yeah,
I feel like.
I mean, like, yeah. So okay, we could talk about that. So there's some other campaigns that do tell you that you can tech, like, yeah, here it is. Thank you. This is the Forgotten Age, which you can kind of do the same thing. It's asking for you to resign here on the first location you're at, so you can get here. You have to move across the whole map to get here. And there's lots of ways to do this, but there's some really easy ways to do it. I'm out of here is like the easiest way to do this, because now you don't even need to worry about for the garden, where I think that this doesn't have a Resignability unless there's like no enemies in here or something, or no ready enemies.
No ready enemies, and it's on the agenda. It's on the act.
Right. This is just, you can always use this, although you're going to want it at the end. And I mean, it's important for finishing the scenario and getting the Relic of Ages, but it's not campaign ending per se. But I think this is like really easy to just say, I'm out of here. Join the Caravan also brought in here for like very similar things. Yeah. But the garden might not even be revealed, so you couldn't even use Join the Caravan.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like these cards, like bringing them and having them be, I don't want to say dead weight in your hand for the first 2 scenarios, because Join the Caravan's like always gonna be good, but I think this is fine, right? I'm a little concerned slightly, just as a talking point here, is like, do players who are really experienced with the campaigns, do they always tech for this? And if so, does that mean it's almost required or intended that you tech for these kinds of things? And is that good for the game?
I think that's a great thing. One thing we'll do for this video is, why don't we, whenever we come to like specific scenario tech and campaign tech, is, let's say if we do it or not, how often we do it, right? And how valuable it is. Because I usually always will tech for entryway and garden. These ones I'll always do. Like, I won't always take horror, right? But I will always do some plan for garden and some plan for entryway if my card pool allows it.
Yeah. I don't know the answer for me. I would say I rarely do. And that's because I have a little voice in the back of my head that says, but this is what is supposed to be challenging about this scenario. And if you're just play like Luke, for example, right? You're just said, this isn't a problem for me. So yeah, that's the benefit of playing Luke, but have I played the scenario? I feel like for entryway, it's kind of funny because you're skipping the last act, essentially. Garden, you need to get a lot of the way there already to make that even available.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's a little, like, I'm not to say I never do this, or I look down on people who do, but there's part of me that's like, am I just reading ahead? I'm not reading ahead because I've played the scenarios before, but like, am I just saying, oh, I don't want to play this part of the scenario, and I'll just trivialize it in some sense with one card in my deck? And that's where like there's a scale, right? I think there's certain things you can do to like completely remove the challenge. There's cards that just make it a little bit easier, like maybe Fine Clothes is somewhat of an example of that for the non-2 skill test ones in The Last King. And then there's, stuff that are just like, this would be good here and it will help, rather than it's only here for one thing. And I don't know. I don't know, for me.
I think that's fair, like, to be like, it's kind of like, it feels like too efficient. Like, am I cheating? But like, my logic for that kind of thing is that, like, there's powerful player cards already, and like that is the home for I'm out of here, right? Like, this card was designed to be a tool that you can use to cheat like a rogue way, right? Like, especially if you compare Join the Caravan to this costs 5, right? So like, this one, I'll never feel bad about playing Join the Caravan. I'm out of here, it always feels a little bit dirty. I'll definitely agree to that, but to me it's like, intentionally that's the space that this card lives in, right? It's supposed to feel like kind of dirty when you do it, and that's the power of the card and the design of the card, and I feel like that's the reason why it leaves the binder, so I want to like celebrate the card and use the tool to my advantage when it comes.
That's right. I actually have a note on that just to sort of say, this is a tech card, right? It doesn't really exist outside of this, right? Maybe there are some cards that, like Join the Caravan, I think is one that's playable anywhere, but it was designed for this, so clearly it was intended, so it's okay to use it for its intended purpose. I think there's, again, some different variety, I guess, of how much you're cheesing a scenario with this. I've had a good time playing I'm Out of Here, even in The Last King, where you have to resign to get out.
Yep.
And you resign from a different location, essentially. It's like, that's like, oh, you saved yourself a couple actions. That's great. in Doom Vetsley, it's saving you so much more than that.
Yes, yeah. I think a big thing too is I also will sometimes, like, I'll bring I'm Out of Here to a blind play. If I'm a rogue and I don't need card draw, I'll run it over manual dexterity, right? And then, like, in a pinch, you feel like a genius on a blind play. You're like, wow, I text against this scenario without even knowing it. And sometimes it's just nice to, like, resign. And yeah, it's a very interesting card. I think it's a very interesting outlook to have on it too.
There's some good questions in the chat.
Yes, I was just scrolling up to transition to that as well. I want to just quickly go to AC Play for I'm new to Arkham Horror, and I compare Commander MTG deck building to building an Investigator deck. What do you think? I mean, it's very identity based, like in Commander. You go to the strengths and weaknesses of your Commander, and then also your card pool as well, for sure. If you're a veteran player with new person, do you tech for the campaign or let them figure out what the tech is? That is a question that is very good, Astute, and something that I often have to deal with Eric, right? So if we think about it, I did in Dunwich. If we look at Dunwich, I brought a firearm Mark Harrigan deck to deal with the conglomeration and the avian thrall. I didn't do anything for Beyond the Veil and Brood of Yogg Sothoth, but this, like the horror, is better for like teching against without swaying it, right? Because you can win Dunwich with melee weapons. I've done it, right? But it's easier if you do it with guns. Likewise with Carcosa, I brought horror, right? I brought horror healing just because it was one of the 2 random ancient stones that I rolled with Harvey Walters. Eric was Luke in Forgotten Age, and I was Parallel Skids, so where there wasn't too much there for me. I just brought the foot again. You'll see the small decisions for like building for the campaign as opposed to letting the campaign like just do its thing. Those small like decisions, just to make it like, my goal for a new player is to have it be smoother for them, right? Just try to be as smooth as possible without like controlling it. However, with that said, I did bring in my Ursula deck, I did bring Transmogrify for the Deep One Bull because there was, Eric and I had a conversation after Hemlock where they said that they started to feel like they didn't really know how to handle problems, and that they might want me to actually just start like doing a bit more so they can actually see like how things are assessed. So I actively made that decision to bring it in here, to be like, hey, this is an enemy we're going to deal with this way, and now we don't need to solve it like that. Because otherwise I probably wouldn't have brought Transmogrify for the Deep One Bull, but Eric told me they wanted to win.
Yeah, I don't play that much with new players, but I think just even the blind playthrough is kind of similar because you don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So it's as if everyone is new. But I agree that the question is more about like, do you want to keep that information from the new player that you're playing with, and rather than them figuring it out on their own? I don't know. Like on a blind playthrough, certainly since I don't know what to expect, and I don't generally ask around about that sort of thing for people who've started the campaign before me, I actually like just having a balance of different skills. You know, I'm maybe running more of the unexpected courage type cards just because I need to be prepared for anything. And yeah, the game is going to get me when it asks for something different, and then you lose.
Yeah.
My first time I played The Longest Night in Hemlock Vale, we did not do much. We were able to resign.
Yep.
But it was a campaign that was already pretty tough, especially at that point going later. And after that, I needed to tech for it. And there was just a scenario that begs you to tech for it.
Yep.
There's a number of different things you need to do. But like, again, your first run through any scenario, it's already tough to just keep up with what's going on, that you can't plan out the level of things we're talking about here as easily. And sometimes you can find that the scenario itself has some more stuff to push on you, like, okay, really you need to take advantage of those barriers and traps and decoys. Like, you have to do it as much as possible, but having extra tech makes it even better. Someone else, actually, speaking of Hemlock Vale, asked about the minecart one. Do you choose to do the minecart if you're playing Ursula? I actually did play Ursula in Feast of Hemlock Vale, and we did play the minecart scenario. And the problem with that one compared to, say, Horror and High Gear is that I think you can't investigate on your turn. Or maybe you do. Maybe you can. I don't know. There's something kind of funny there. But you still can use her reaction after you move to investigate the new location. So it wasn't, like, terrible. But I think there was maybe some strange interaction with her weakness. I'm not sure. In Horror and High Gear, I think you're moving before the investigation phase ends or something. But whatever it is, it was fine. I actually didn't think that mattered so much. So usually when there's a little bit of something going on, it doesn't hurt that bad for those investigators, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Atomic is saying it really well for new players. You can like mention some ways to avoid aggressive feel bad experiences that go all campaign long. And like, so an example, blind play fighter in Last Forgotten Age, that not everything needs to be killed. Like, I think that's a good way of, like, the idea of, like, it's kind of a shame. It's like how evade is used for both the act of taking the evade action and exhausting the enemy in Arkham. Like, I feel like the term of tech is different for teching against a campaign and teching against a scenario. Like, I think they are actually, like, different levels of what they bring to the table and, like, to you as a player. Teching for a campaign smooths out the entire campaign experience. Teching against a scenario, like, let's just point to a few things, like Pocket Telescope and Horror and High Gear, and I'm Out of Here and the Doom of Etzli, or, like, even, for example, Waylay and the Brood of Yog-Sothoth. These are all things that, like, minimize the challenge of the scenario itself.
Sometimes brutally. I think Pocket Telescope is Travis has talked about this, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. We think that this is also one of the cards when I did the re-ranking of Innsmouth where I called it broken, because it is kind of just broken. And I think it's like one of those things that like it's so unassuming. You know, you look at this card and you're like, how can this be a problem? And then you like play Innsmouth and you're like, oh, okay, it just removes any mystery. But at the same time, I feel like this is a card that you could bring into any campaign and you'll find a use for it and it'll be good.
Yeah, I think people just say, oh, well, I'm going to go to that location anyway, right? Like, why do I need to look first?
Yep.
And yeah, then you play 5 out of those 8 scenarios have some kind of randomized location business going on. You see where you need to go, or you save yourselves 2 actions from going there and coming back. Especially good in any of those scenarios that have like a central location and you go and then have to come back anyway. Yep. It saves you so much.
Yeah. Also really good for like
you got
like someone else can just reveal all the locations and you can just like stay there and just do your thing and not have any sort of risks get you. I think Volkloss has a good point here, where an example of like what I would consider good tech and bad tech, Pocket Telescope trivializes things for the whole team. So I would wager that that is bad tech. But I'm Out of Here trivializes a particular challenge for you, I think is good tech. Because I feel like, well, yeah, it kind of hurts to have you leave I'm Out of Here and everyone else stays. At the same time, that all it really means is just one less encounter card each turn. Right? Like, that's like really what it comes down to. You save on all those actions, but like it's not done. With Pocket Telescope, I think it just actually breaks horror in high gear. At least in my thought for it.
I don't think it's even just horror in high gear.
No, yeah, no, yeah. That's like the easy one to point to. But like Pit of Despair, it's great for. The Devil's Reef, it's great for. It's also really good in Too Deep. You can move ahead and investigate clues off locations that you've left behind because they're all still connected. You just can't move through them, right? Yeah. It's good in like anything with randomized locations. Like it's really good in the Unspeakable Oath. How many actions are you going to save trying to find the right cell at the bottom, right? How many move actions does that mean you're going to get out quicker, right?
Miskatonic Museum.
Yep. Saving all that.
Yeah, there's sometimes an ability on a card in play that lets you do Pocket Telescope, but it costs a little bit more to get it. And it just says you do it for free once per round. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what they cooked with this card, but...
I don't know. I mean, it looks very unassuming, so maybe that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, it's a good flavor win, but then, like, you put it into the hands of the dirty gamers like us, and suddenly it's like, oh, no.
So I want to go back to I'm Out of Here for a second, because this is a really interesting point that Volk brought up about it. Like, it just solves the problem for you and not for anyone else. And yeah, sometimes, like, that's enough. But yeah, this is a good time to talk about this. We played Unspeakable Oath not so long ago, and we didn't have a good time.
We did not.
It was a challenge run, right? And I think that part of the problem why we lost that scenario, you brought this card. So you were always intending on using this, but I didn't have a solution.
Yeah.
And kind of my thoughts afterwards was like, well, I didn't tech enough for this scenario to win. And I felt kind of bad about that. Like, do I have to tech for scenarios to win them? That seems like bad design. And I think the answer is like, no, you don't. But we were trying a gimmick deck already. So we made things hard for ourselves to begin with. And having some kind of tech would have alleviated that imbalance that we had in kind of what the scenario was bringing to us versus what we were bringing. So yeah, afterwards I was like, well, I could have just put in Astral Travel. That kind of would have done the same thing. We could have had Storm of Spirits, any other sort of things that would have dealt with the various problems we ran into. But initially I thought, gosh, this is kind of bad to have to tech so hard for a scenario that is campaign ending. But I think we should have made up for that in other ways. And maybe that's kind of like teching for campaigns is fine, but really you don't need to. It's just that it smooths out some of the variance in these scenarios if you don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I don't think, like even if someone was a rogue and they were playing Unspeakable Oath for their 10th time and they didn't run I'm out of here, I wouldn't blink, right? I would be like it basically comes down to the same sort of stuff, right? Where it's like the deduction conversation, where you don't always need deduction, but you need ways to be clues positive, right? And I think it's the same sort of thing with, like, when you're coming into Unspeakable Oath, you don't need to run I'm out of here. That's just the easiest button to press. But Scout Ahead, for example, does a very similar thing, right? But it's more useful in other scenarios as well. I'm out of here is just the easy tech option, but it's not like the only thing that you can bring. That's why I also like Join the Caravan's a good example. But I would say, I'm just going to grab it, like that Scout Ahead lives in a similar space to this, right? And also Nimble, yeah, like Nimble with Astute. Like, I could evade, I'll actually get that on the screen as well for people who don't know cards by name, but might know them by art. So like Scout Ahead and Nimble, I could evade one of the big enemies in the basement and then move up 3 spaces, right? And that's kind of like, it's not saving as many actions as I'm out of here, but it's like the same kind of idea that movement is important, so you're going to want to move. So like same with like Entryway. These cards all kind of do the same thing to tech against the threat of the scenario. They just do it with varying levels of power against it.
Open Gate, another one.
Open Gate, yeah, we bring that. We brought that through Carcosa, and also Circle Undone. It's really good in Circle Undone as well.
I kind of like that there's options in a lot of classes that feel very class defined. So Track Shoes is another one in Survivor. So there's just like lots of ways to deal with challenges. And yeah, you can kind of run all of them. I agree that I'm out of here is just like you play the event and you're done. Whereas these might require some other work. But if you don't want to run one of them, your deck needs to do something.
Yeah.
needs to do one of these.
And the nice thing about these cards is these cards are like always good, right? So like they're always usable. And like I'm out of here, even while it's the best, you even said it has its own weaknesses where what if there's an enemy on the final location that you have to resign from, right? So they all have like their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think because I'm out of here is so focused on what it does for its ability to tech, you have that take those risks that come with it not always being good as well.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of feel bad about, I mean, we lost that scenario. I know you teched for it because you were like thinking we're going to lose here if we don't do something. And I was just like, I just want to win the scenario outright. And maybe that was just a mistake or we weren't on the same wavelength about how to resolve some of the other problems, but that's challenge runs for you sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one came down to the 2 Mystic problem. I think that was the real thing. Also, sorry, I made a mistake with I'm out of here. This is its own Resignability. So you actually can circumvent the issue with the ready enemy. But like with Join the Caravan, you couldn't, because this is its own Resign.
I think it depends on which scenario, because it says you can only do it if there's a scenario card with the Resignability in play, and I'm not sure if the act grants that to a different card.
I see what you're saying.
Curtain Call and has something similar too, about like the lobby gaining Resign, but I forget without looking at the wording offhand.
I'll pull it out because I think that is very interesting to also look at here.
Yeah, I do like that too. That you get the hell out of here is on the card itself rather than being flavor text.
Yeah, because it would be one of those things where it's like depends entirely on that. Like if it's always there or no, I grabbed the wrong deck. This one, please. Garden gains if there is no ready enemy in the garden. So it would still apply for that because then there wouldn't have been. There's no Resign if there is a ready enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But if this just said the garden gains Resign, then it would work all the time. Gotcha. So I was right in my original statement.
Yeah, I think so. Can you look at the one for Curtain Call?
Sure.
I could have this backwards. I don't know. I mean, this isn't. We didn't research this part.
It's on the Act decks, right? All of them.
Maybe they're both the same.
They look to be both the same, yeah.
Okay, either they both work or neither of them work.
That's how ARKHAM is. There's always these strange things going on here. Okay.
All right.
Do we have any more like general stuff? Like also for people in chat who might not have known what teching was before. Do you think? Do you feel like we've kind of summed up what teching is enough, or do you want us to go further into it? Especially the idea of campaign versus scenario tech, because they are different. And I think it's one of those things where I think we've explained the differences, where campaign smooths out the whole thing, but not necessary. I mean, but also like no teching is necessary. I can play any campaign without teching, except for I think there is some fairness to say that Hemlock Vale can actually get really hard without teching for it. And I don't know, that might have just been an accident with the decisions for the design, which we'll get to. But yeah, I don't think any teching is necessary, but I'll do it most of the time if it just makes it like easier. But the idea of teching is also different. Like these 4 cards all do a similar thing when it comes to teching. Does teching make you clever or good? Both. It makes you goodly clever or cleverly good.
So I almost never build a deck after I play the campaign once without thinking about what were some of the sticking points, or like what does the campaign encourage or discourage. So I feel like I'm always teching in some sense. And then there's always like, you know, maybe the fighter has to have some clues because you can only spend your own clues. Like I'll bring in something to discover clues. And that feels like it's more broad than the scenario teching per se, but I don't know. But I also will play some particular choices amongst many choices. Butterfly Swords being a good example here. I'm doing that right now on my channel. It's like, this was really good in this campaign. But I think I just always do this, and I bet most veterans of the game do this to some extent. But then I always wonder, like when I recommend decks or deck building to other people, how much of that teching is implied? Like you can't just bring this random deck list into any campaign because there's like a chunk of it. I don't know what the chunk is, but there's some chunk that is geared towards that campaign that I built it for. And I don't know if there's like a shell that I could have built instead that would be good in any campaign, but I rarely play some generic deck for a generic campaign because there is no generic campaign where you don't need to think about these things, except for, I think we talked about this before the stream, like Edge of the Earth seems pretty open.
Yeah, same with Drowned City. I think Drowned City is also pretty open.
Yeah, I think so too. There's a couple things I think you need to keep in mind, but it gives you some of those tools. Just not quite as much as Edge of the Earth does, but it does do something.
Yeah, it's been interesting because like whenever I do one of my deck showcase videos, which I haven't done forever, people, I'll do another one day, people. I know you love them. For people who want, like, where's this? I build them generally for that one because I do believe that while teching is good, I like when I do like a deck showcase to have that just be universally just like, it's like a campaign I'd bring to a blind run, right? And I think that ultimately you can still survive with that logic because, I mean, I've won a lot of blind runs, right? And there is a lot of power in a deck that is just kind of universally good at everything, right? Like universally, like maybe I'm not like in terms of the fact of like offensively universally good at everything, but like defensively is, I think, more important than like being good at everything. So like, while yes, for example, manual dexterity is better in Forgotten Age, Guts is still good in Forgotten Age, right? There's still going to be brain tests you're going to want to pass. So leave it open to those discoveries with the deck and then upgrade to change as needed. It's a very different thing though when you're like bringing a deck to someone else. It's likewise when I would like, if I would like build a deck for a new player, I probably wouldn't bring campaign tech into it as well because I don't think they would know what to do. Like they would transmogrify the first deep one they see, and I'd be like, well, actually, you're supposed to save that for the deep one, bull. You'll get it when it comes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, personally, I like it best when a campaign teaches you that in some way, that you can tech for it as the campaign goes along. Even if it is your blind run, it should have some kind of vague theme or something repeated. But what's interesting to me is that there's most of the campaign tech cards that we are talking about are level 0.
Yep.
So they kind of force you to do it on initial deck building, unless you have Adaptable. So it's harder to add in things that are specific for those scenarios, but that's okay, because I think still you can surpass those challenges by just doing generically good things, right? Yep. And probably that's, even though I totally agree with you. Like on a deck showcase, you can just say this will work pretty well. It won't be the most amazing version of this that could be teched for a campaign, but it will still win. And maybe we have to consider that for like the card pool too, right? Like some cards are kind of bad because they are actually campaign tech or scenario tech, and some cards are just good most of the time, and that means that they're playable basically everywhere, and they will get you over the hump of not having had some scenario or campaign tech in your deck.
Do you know what could be fun to do for a video series to test this out? Let's build decks for the Forgotten Age and then roll a different campaign. So we build our decks for a campaign, but then roll a different one and see if any of that tech carries over. Yeah. That could be an interesting thing to try.
That's so funny. So Pax and I are kind of stupidly doing this. I think I told you we did a Nathaniel Cho deck that was level 0 that he built, and he was like, let's see if this can beat the first scenario of the Drowned City. And we did that, and it was a little painful. But at the end of it, I said, guess what? Now we're going to play Curtain Call with the same deck. And he's like, no. If we play Curtain Call, you will die immediately when you draw the first Poltergeist, which probably should be here too. So he was like, I have to switch something out and put in 2 copies of Enchanted Blade just to deal with the Poltergeist. All right, I said fine. But yeah, like that's exactly the question, is like, what is your, especially since scenario 1s can be very hard, like what is your ability to win with like the wrong set of cards? Because we're so geared towards, oh, we have to have this kind of tech in the deck, and you roll a random one instead, and you're like, I can't kill this big enemy, because maybe we're just so used to, maybe I'm speaking for myself here, I'm so used to playing the campaigns where I can anticipate all of these challenges, and the deck building is really about meeting those challenges where they are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I just don't have as bad of a time, because when any, like the Poltergeist shows up, I'm like, oh, I have a spell, that's why it's in here, or a relic. But what if you're playing and you have nothing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like definitely cascades into like solo pretty tough, and like lower player counts for sure. I know I've had to like I usually actually don't tech against Poltergeists. I just assume that my book will eventually get through it, which is kind of funny, because I've had like moments where I had to, like, Joe Diamond was like, I remember chat thought I was crazy for like losing XP because of my weakness to kill the Poltergeist instead, right? But like that's the penance I had to pay for my no teching, right? And sometimes you do get punished for it, but I guess the theory is that you have to like make up for that in other ways. Like I think another good example is, I don't want to spoil too much for Eric and I's Hemlock Vale campaign because it just went live today, the first episode. But there is the enemy that can only be defeated by spells and relics, right? And we were Finn Edwards and Rita Young, which if you don't know, don't really have a lot of those in their kit. So it was kind of just like, this thing is always here, right? And you just have to be like, well, we're going to just be evading this and hopefully not discarding cards to go with it, right?
At least you can evade. The Poltergeist has a 4 evade value on it, so
Yeah.
it is. I mean, yeah. I mean, probably since you play 2-player plus, there's always someone who can pass a
Book test, but yeah.
a book test,
But in
right?
solo, yeah, you need to be. I think solo has to have like. I mean, solo is a whole different beast, right? Like solo, you have to like. You're kind of teching against everything because you have to solve it all. You can't lean on anybody else. And then in 4 players, I think you have to tech less, right? Because someone can just like kill the poltergeist.
Yeah.
It's like,
So, my God, I had to pass just to get out of the lobby a 6 investigate test. And you
Yeah.
might say, you're Nathaniel Cho, just kill him. Yeah, well, I think it's a lot of actions
yeah,
to kill the guy, especially with the kind of stupid deck we were running with Crowbar, with the Royal Emissary coming down on you. So I had to pass the test, and all the icons in my hand were enough to do it. But you can do that once in solo.
yeah.
Again, in 2-player, you have enough where you can commit to each other. You can do other kinds of things to mitigate it. Probably you don't run a team with exactly the same stats. So that'd be fun. Play 2 investigators with 1 book.
You know, never say never.
We might do it. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the teching part there is like, if you don't, there can be some serious roadblocks, but usually those kinds of issues are alleviated for like a balanced team and not, did you have this one card in your deck?
Yeah. Because, like, I don't think there's any of the cards that we have here. Like, yeah, I always bring I'm out of here for the Garden if I have it. But, like, I'm also okay not bringing it. You just have to, like, once again, it's like the idea of moving or trying to get positive tempo. Like, another thing that I think people don't talk about that is also another tech thing for this is that straitjacket, right? That could just be a killer if the wrong person draws it. But is anyone here really like working for that? They're like, I'm not going to bring hand slots for this. It's the kind of same thing. But the whole thing about that whole scenario is it's trying to choke your tempo as much as possible, right? So to beat it for teching against it, you need to like just make sure your tempo is really positive. But like there's a lot of ways to get positive tempo, but I think like a bad example of having to tech against it is the reaction on Hemlock Vale, where this one rewards succeeding by a lot, right? But I think succeeding by a lot is less universal than compression on movement or like compression on damage or compression on clues or like mythos mitigation, right? So
yeah, it's actually like the flip side of this is Haunted, right? In TCU, where it techs against you playing the survivor fail stuff.
yeah.
Specifically, look what I found. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as it looks, really. I mean, I think you can still do it. But it's basically saying, hey, that little archetype that you want to play, you don't get to do it.
Yeah.
This one basically says, hey, that archetype that some investigators play, but you don't have to win, but is generically good. I mean, you tend to want to succeed tests by, well, you may accidentally succeed tests by a lot, but I don't think it's as an archetype is something that every investigator is trying to do baseline. So I'd also kind of agree that it's a little, I mean, it's like really bad to play this one, succeed by 2 and say, I'll take a shot.
Yeah, draw an encounter card and then be like, ooh.
And you get an encounter card.
Yeah.
And you're like, thanks, game.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I don't think they decided on this being techable, right? I think this was just like what they decided for this that worked. But then the downside is that teching for it feels so good. Like, I brought Butterfly Swords with Lily Chen, and I got through, like, the whole Abyss deck in 2 turns, right?
Yeah.
Which is, like, crazy. And I didn't bring Butterfly Swords for this. I brought them for these dumbass motherfuckers, these birds.
Yeah, the same.
And they're really good against them. Like, very good against them. But then they turned out they also just crushed this.
Well, the good thing about Butterfly Swords is I think it's a good card anyway.
Yep.
So I mean, it's 5 XP, right? This is not this is something you build your deck around, and it has this like advantage that it does really well in this campaign.
It's not as like ubiquitous as like these things, right?
Right, exactly. And you don't feel like you're losing value by it drawing it, and that scenario didn't have the.
It didn't have enemies, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But it's true, right? Like, as a weapon, being a tech card is actually also kind of like even crazier in a way, like, because you're right, like, it's good, you don't have to draw this, like, so you don't have to, like, if you don't get the thing that you're teching against for with this, it's really good. But then, like, your weapon being your tool to tech against the campaign is kind of wild. Like, another example of that is, these kind of are all together, the concealed card, Butterfly Swords, it's just action compression. Again, it's the same sort of thing. It's compressing your action, but being able to do multiple of the concealed triggers is very, very good. And it's something that I actually do actively seek to do in Scarlet Keys, but I wouldn't really consider it to be like, again, like scenario tech. It's campaign tech. It just makes it smoother to like bump up your stats or get clues or things with like multiple like poking actions, but at the same time that statement is kind of true for every campaign. There's not a campaign where I'm like, if you bump your stats up, it's bad, you know? If you get multiple clues at multiple times, that's bad, right? Like, so it's less like exactly where it's like play I'm out of here to resign, or play Transmogrify or Handcuffs for the Deep One Bull or the Brotherhood Cultist. That's like a little bit more focused than, hey, you should make your stats really high. You'll pass more tests.
Volklas is asking or mentioning, I forget what this was, a similar issue to, but about the alarm level in Dark Side of the Moon. We didn't talk too much about Dream Eaters yet. You have a couple things up here, but okay, so that scenario requires you to have like reasonable agility to pass certain tests so you don't increase your alarm level, and then you have to have, I think it's agility or book to pass a test to reduce it at the end.
Yeah, I'm just getting the card. Yeah, book and agility.
Yeah, and then okay, so the question maybe that Volt's trying to ask, or maybe not, but I have is like, do you tech in Dream Eaters for this, saying I need to pass these tests to win, or not? My answer, I'm going to answer it first, is I don't like the scenario, and I don't care if I lose it. So I think it's just very low stakes for me to want to warp my deck building around a kind of a mechanic that I find to be kind of bad. So I don't care. All these other ones, they feel much more, I don't know, you kind of need to do it, you kind of need to think about it. This one, maybe one investigator needs to resign and then you're good, and if you don't, if you both die, I think it's like a slap on the wrist for the next one.
Yeah, you get a False Awakening, don't you?
Yeah, which is the stupidest weakness I've ever seen. I don't know how often you've played with it, but like very rarely.
I've only played with it once.
Yeah, so this starts in play, so it doesn't even take up a deck slot really, and one person just needs to take a test.
Yeah, it's pretty chill. Pretty chill.
Yeah, that's it. Anyway, I don't. Oh,
it is your background right now. It is your background, yeah.
That's so funny. Huh. Good art. Card that people rarely see. But yeah, I don't care for the scenario. So it's like one of those where I'm like, oh well, I'm not gonna lose sleep if I can't pass those tests.
Yeah, I also never tech for this. Not because I don't like the scenario, but I mean the stakes are super low. You're right about that. Like the stakes could not be lower. But I mean, if I can't pass one of these tests, I'm like, what am I doing?
Oh, you could pass the test, but you have to pass it by 3, and you only get to do it once.
That's the thing I'm saying. Like, if I can't even pass it like twice in the game by 3, or like, then I'm like, what am I doing? Because I don't know, man. Like, it's just such an easy test to pass, but also, like you said, only one of us needs to do it. And also, I think the big downside that I think people have with this is that the person who usually has the higher alarm level is the fighter. And as we know about fighters, they generally don't have high book or foot. They're usually brain and fist. It's just the way that it goes, right? And while they're doing all of this, everyone else just gets there, and then the person is like, I guess I'll die, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, this goes to my previous statement where the game isn't your friend. And you might get the test that you don't like, and if you die, who cares? There's like you're gonna still get on that ship somehow.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't matter too much.
Yeah. But yeah, Dream Eaters doesn't have really
get this if both people die.
I think so.
Or everyone dies, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to actually get this. I don't think Dream Eater has a lot of tech. Like, there is the swarming stuff for, like, Zoe. But I think it's the same sort of thing where, like, obviously you can do this campaign without Zoe and still do great, right? But Zoe just has, like, that extra advantage. I think you also brought this taunt out here, right?
I did.
Great way to draw a bunch of cards.
Yeah, this is for the swarming cards and also for anything that we're like, hey, there's 3 whippoorwills in this scenario. They can hang out until I draw this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's like 2 scenarios, so, or 3 maybe. But otherwise, yes, it's for the swarm cards.
Yeah. And then the other thing that it like rewards you is like evading. But again, I don't think that's like really much to do that. How about on the hunt on cards like it versus where the gods dwell? That's a cool interaction, but again, I don't think you need it, right? Like, I think like it makes it easier, but I don't think it's like so what Volklos talked about, like where the gods dwell, a 0 you can maybe get near Lathotep, but in with the 3 you actually can just find one, which is like really funny when it happens. He's like, no, this isn't how it's supposed to work. But it's a good way to do that. But I've won that scenario so many times without it that I don't miss it if I don't have it. But like, if I don't bring like a handcuffs against these Brotherhood cultists and I miss one of the attacks, I'm like, I really wish I had a handcuffs here, or someone had a handcuffs.
Yeah, I think on the hunt is like, in that scenario it's scenario cheese. That's what it is to me. Like, yeah, I get it. If you're trying to go for the secret ending, fine, maybe you need to do that. But I'm pretty sure that's not intended by the designers that works. And to me, it's more of the, sure, it's fun once. It's like playing Dim Carcosa with Calvin or Agnes or something, where you're just taking full advantage. Like, that's not scenario tech. That's like, you can do it because it's a funny interaction.
I think cheese is a good word for it. I think that's like perfect. It's cheese. And like, that's not to say it's bad. I'm not going to bemoan
you for doing it, but I would bemoan you for doing it every time we play the scenario.
Yes. Yeah. We're playing Pat's Carcosa. I think I'm going to bring Agnes Baker to this one again. No, you brought her the last 4 times. I think we should heed his warning. Okay, that's actually something I want to bring up, because I did have this here. Why don't we start working towards just kind of moving through these cycles, kind of poking at stuff, and start closing this out, because I do think we set this up. But let's go to Carcosa first. So we talked about some stuff with like the horror and the garden in Unspeakable Oath. Someone mentioned parlay in the Last King, which I think is good. But I think there's also subconscious decisions that players make, and they seem subconscious, but they're actually conscious, which is like killing everybody at the party, lighting them all on fire, right? Because it's just like the right choice to make. And those are one of those things that I think that is ultimately you teching against the campaign, making the decision to make it easier down the road. But people generally don't think about that as campaign tech, but it is. So much so that I actually saw for the Arkham Con Iron Man, there's a challenge run where you can't light them on fire and no one can die, right? So it's like actively making it harder because everyone makes it easier because it's just the right choice to make for the campaign.
Okay, so there's some scenario choices in various campaigns that kind of remind me of this, like that have no I don't want to say no benefit, but there's like no difference really, other than it's just a harder path, right? And it's almost like choose your own difficulty. So the conviction route
Yep.
is easier. I think it's just easier overall. I don't think it's a ton easier, but clearly if you are just doing everything conviction, this is one of the reasons why you just don't have these enemies as a problem. The downside is you have one mental trauma later, and that's probably not a big deal. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. Like usually when I play Path to Carcosa at this point, I just, unless it's some like other gimmick that I'm doing for the campaign, I'm doing full doubt, full conviction, or maybe a few times I've tried the third route. But it feels like one's easier, one's harder. Maybe there's some other differences, but I'm not just going to pick the thing that's always easy just because it's easy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, why am I playing the game, right? I don't always want to make the decisions that are beneficial to me because, I don't know, it almost feels like, why don't I just put Cyclopean Hammer in the deck? Because there's got to be some tension, right? I'm not sure that's exactly the same level, but I've played like Forgotten Age on the Alejandro route. I've played it on the Ichitaka route. I played it on your own route, and it's just for variety, right? I want to see what the campaign looks like in these different incarnations.
Yeah, definitely. I'm similar. I like to change it up as well, but I do still find myself, if I can't play I'm Out of Here, I'll light the house on fire if Constance isn't dead. If Constance is dead, I'm fine with fighting the other ones, but it's tough to have to just build a new deck halfway through a campaign.
Yeah, sometimes we just don't.
It is what that is what makes Unspeakable Oath so good, because no matter what, there's tension. No matter what. If you kill Constance, if you don't kill Constance, this scenario is always difficult, which is what I really enjoy about it. Let's bump up to Dunwich, which kind of just had some general stuff as well. There's the ranged and firearm synergy that comes with these, and I think this makes total sense when you look at the original design decisions where you weren't just supposed to put down a machete and use it for the whole campaign, right? Like you're supposed to like have to use firearms and stuff. That's kind of fallen to the wayside. We've seen it a little bit. There was some kind of like punishments for that in some recent stuff, but you can survive without the melee weapons, but without the ranged firearm spells, but it does make it a lot easier to just do that.
Yeah, that's true. I think I rarely check for this on purpose. You know what I mean? Like I'm not.
Yep. Same.
I think that I end up with someone on the team who has a firearm or spell, and then that's just like good enough.
I usually try to think a plan for this guy, just because he's like in scenario 1 or 2. But it's true. Usually just punch him. Actually, it's usually like God sort them out, because killing this guy activates it.
That's right. I do that too. I did that in a Michael McGlenn deck recently.
It works. It's like this guy is just, he gives victory 1, right? Like that's some pretty good tech.
Yep.
I think another one, Beyond the Veil, obviously, but this one is very different. I never seen it actually, like, it's a very strange card, but it's always in the back of your mind, right? And you're usually like, it's another thing where it's like, the idea that tech in the campaign sense is also playing around it, right? Like you're playing around this card when it comes. The Broods are actually super techable. They're not elite. You can just like kill them with other things, like Waylay. There is Mind Wipe, as you have down here as one of those options. And another thing as well is the idea of you can't win the scenario if you don't have high brain, right? Which I personally think is a crutch. Like I said, I beat this one with Solo Finn, and if Solo Finn can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah. I mean, it does like go into my thought process of who to take in this campaign. Like I find anyone who has like a pretty decent willpower score does better on average.
Like, 3 or 4 is usually. I usually like to hover around 3 or 4 if I'm going to choose someone.
But you can usually make up for it, and this is not a scenario that requires you to kill them all. So don't.
Just
it's
don't.
okay. You don't need all the VP.
I'll throw you for. I'll let you take the lead for Forgotten Age for this one.
Okay, we talked about a couple of these already, but just starting with the very first scenario, you were kind of rudely told, and I didn't even put the pit vipers in here, but you're rudely told that you need to pass agility tests, right? And the snake bite gives you an out, right? If you have an ally, and that's okay. I usually like to tech for having some amount of allies that's more than just like I want to always keep my Peter Sylvester in play forever. Because I think poison is really bad. And the reason it's really bad is soon you'll start seeing things like the Fang of Yig, and you just sit there and you're like, I don't know, I guess I try to evade at 2 to 3 for 3 actions.
Yep.
It's awful. Unless you've got some plan for these guys, but I think mostly the plan should be don't get poisoned.
Yep. And if you do get poisoned, give it to your fighter, who the medicine. Make sure they are the one who can be healed.
Anyway, so agility matters, poison matters here, and there's 3 of these in the deck, and they can come at really inopportune times. So it's just it's a play style. It's not like there's a tech card for this card per se, but it's going to make me say I want to put more manual dexterities, other cards that have some icons on them that help me pass the test, and it's usually okay. It also makes you play, I think this card in particular makes you play the Untamed Wilds as a low vengeance as much as possible scenario, so the skulls are all zeros.
Yep.
Makes it easier to pass these tests as well as some other tough ones. But then, yeah, we get to H-Taka, who shows up at the end of whatever round you get all the clues and you want to spend the clues. And she's a very tough thing for you to fight in scenario 1. Like, what else makes you pass a 5 fight test? I think the end of the scenario of Riddles and Rain, I think, has the Red Glove Man. You have to fight him, who's got 5, but there's other ways for you to reduce the difficulty. There's other ways you can deal with him, I think. But she's really rude. And you can fight, and that's like more than one action probably. Or you can do the parlay. And you got to do this at least, well, if you're playing 2-player, you got to do it twice. More players, it's even worse. So you kind of maybe think about not doing it in 3 or 4 player. But if you want to go the Ichitaka route, I think you have to.
Yep.
And it's a tough test. If you fail, she just does 2 damage to you if you didn't bother to evade her first. And you I've had investigators just die from this. You fail the test, auto fail or something, she's still engaged with you, does another 2 damage to you in the enemy phase, and you're already hard pressed. So it's tough. So yeah, you've got fine clothes, well dressed. I think these are pretty good cards to try to pass this test better.
Yeah. Nathan, thank you so much for 4 months at the Golden Table. Yeah, I think it's very interesting because also Atomic does have a good point, which is just that the final scenario does ask so much that's different than you compared to anything else. And I think that's why like Shattered Aeons feels really strange. But I think also this campaign, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, is one that gets easier when you have knowledge for it, right? But it's so hard on the blind play. And that's why a lot of people like don't really have a good time with the blind play. You see all the posts on the Reddit which are like, is it just me, or is like Forgotten Age not as good as people say it is? And everyone says, weirdly enough, give it like 4 or 5 more plays and the Stockholm Syndrome's going to start getting to you. Yeah.
It spirals.
Yep.
If things go poorly early, you don't get the VP necessary to keep up with the game, and it just becomes kind of miserable. We're talking about like getting a root canal.
Yeah, just ask those Yithians. But they did very good in the first scenario. That was the worst part.
I know. It's the second one was just bad. Yeah, so I have both the body of the Yithian here for both a little tongue in cheek. What if you played this with all 2s, as well as the scenario itself? Like, I know at that point in the campaign, you probably can deal with City of Archives fairly well. It's not too bad if things go well, but it's also one that kind of asks you on a second play to keep this in the back of your mind. Like, am I going to buy, as what happened in my blind playthrough, 8 XP into the Golden Pocket Watch right before it gets removed from your deck? Still not happy about that one. Or, you know, maybe even if you're a fighter and you're saying, I'm playing the Runic Axe in this campaign, and it gets removed from this scenario, like, you need another way. If you've been relying on just that, you probably need another way to deal with the scenario. Maybe running more skill cards also helps because you get the icons doubled, but I don't think this is I mean, it's not the hardest scenario in the campaign, but it does, like any other campaign ending scenario, require that you maybe think about it on your next playthrough, because why not?
Like, I understand why people don't like when your unique items get taken from you in this scenario, but to me it's like the perfect game giving you tech against you. It's like, no, those are too powerful here. Fight these Yithians in one-on-one combat as is intended.
I mean, I don't mind them taking away some things, but it's one of, I mean, this campaign, I think, to me, doesn't signpost much.
No, it's, like nothing at all.
So I'm okay with when they make things difficult for reasons where they've, like, hey, have you been paying attention? We told you that horror healing might be good. But then when they're just like, yeah, something random happens to you and you got to deal with it. I'm not saying that's necessarily something they shouldn't try, but that just demands, I think, teching for the second time through.
Yep, agreed. And then we have the Brotherhood Cultist, which is, I think, the first enemy that people widely, like, tried to make a plan for.
Yeah, you've done now a lot of different things, right? You mentioned Transmogrify, or was that handcuffs?
Handcuffs, yeah. Spectral Razor.
Curses, Spectral Razor, yeah.
Mind Wipe.
So I brought up Spectral Razor for another reason too, which it's worth talking about here, because it clearly solves this enemy.
Oh, where's also
because it's one attack, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of reasons to love this card. Does it feel like a tech card?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think the answer is also no, but it does sometimes feel like you're getting a win on things that weren't intended, and it makes you feel smarter than you are.
Yeah, a 3 health aloof enemy, a penguin, just showed up here? Oh no, my Spectral Razor is here.
Yeah, no, it does really have that. It does really reward you, doesn't it? It's like, but it's not a tech card. We're both in agreement there. But it does feel like, well, there's just so much value packed into this freaking card. The card's insane. Yeah.
So, like, I feel like the Molting Hybrid that we mentioned before was their answer to no.
Yeah. I love the reduce the amount to 1 mechanic from this one. Because, so, one thing I also like is when there's unique challenges like this, and you get rewarded for finding a solution for it. You know? And I'm still trying to find, like, my perfect solution that's not butterfly swords, like in other classes. Because that's kind of like where some of the fun is in terms of trying to beat this, the twist that the campaign's throwing at you.
I think the answer to these guys, in the campaign, there's a few other ones that are like this, I think, in the same scenario, are often, especially the ones that are aloof, things like Confound that evade an enemy without being engaged to them. It doesn't, like, delete them from the board, but it does buy you a couple rounds without having to do the whole engage business first. Or playing things like Riot Whistle or Dakota Garofalo to just move and engage them.
Yep. All right, Circle Undone. What did you pulled out these ones?
Yeah, okay, so it's like the beginning and the end. The stuff in the middle I don't think is as interesting to tech for, but the very first scenario is one of the most important ones to do well in, and then the last scenario is the one that you want to win the campaign. So who cares what happens the rest of the campaign? In fact, you can resign in almost every single scenario. So
I mean, I guess that's kind of true for most campaigns, isn't it? The first and last scenario are usually the important ones, unless you can get eliminated halfway through.
Yeah. So the goat spawn is one of those interesting moments, right? And you talked about this a bit earlier about your decisions in the game itself that can be techable. And I found that if you want to have a good time after your blind run, you just do the thing where you collect more clues than are necessary so you can advance the second act fairly quickly. So you're able to then move into locations that are in front of other players and help them with their goat spawn problem. That's like the bare minimum of what you can do, I think, to tech for the campaign. However, these guys are a nightmare because they actually go back to the encounter deck and you might draw them again.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just super rude. A 3-fight, 3-health enemy with a retaliate. And then even if you do kill them, you get horror anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, our good friend the Spectral Razor can be here, but when we played this together, I think that was my solution. Even in Daisy Walker, which you're like 5. Well, we had ways to fight a little better than that, but it demanded an answer. Otherwise, you're just like stuck with these guys.
Yeah, I think in my Amanda deck I brought Transmogrify as well.
You did.
Yeah.
Exactly for it. So it was huge, right? Because you left him behind on some location. So like this is a great card because it turns off the Hunter, turned off the rest of it too, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like, I feel like you have to play something that either is doing 3 damage or neutralizing them in some other way, because you don't want to take 2 fights against this guy.
It is kind of like the thing about this is that for enemy management, the tech cards seem to be pretty similar. It's like the same sort of tech cards are like reoccurring. It's almost as if like just like tech cards generally can fill similar roles into campaigns. And I think enemy tech cards are always good to bring to a campaign. You know, there's always going to be enemies, and there's always going to be some value where it's like, instead of just killing this thing, I'm going to lock it down, right?
Yeah. And it makes sense that in this campaign, the humanoid trait is pretty prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
So things like handcuffs is actually pretty good. Persuasion, although those I guess don't matter anymore, they've been tabooed. But I think persuasion and interrogate were kind of designed for this campaign too.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the first part. And then we've got like our basic acolyte, which you'd say, what do you need a tech for these guys for? Well, they show up a few times, but really in the last scenario, they're a pain. Because you need to, they spawn, it's a really weird scenario where all the enemies spawn in locations that are not your own, which is a neat challenge. So what that means is I often run something to deal with these guys or the Wizard of the Order to get rid of them, because otherwise they accumulate doom, things spiral, it's kind of bad. So I think Atomic's saying get over here probably for the goat spawn. It's actually the same kind of thing tech for these guys. You can
no, I think it was for the hybrid, but yeah, it works for these as well.
Yeah, I think engaging and loop enemies or enemies that are not at your location is really nice. Like that's a get over here I think is a good card, but especially the level 2 version is maybe it's just a tech card for anyone dealing with 1 health enemies. So I like that there. And then you also have to contend with the mindless dancers, and you just need an answer. If it's using the Rod of Carnimagos to make sure they aren't a problem, that's an answer.
Yeah.
But you got to figure it out.
In our Arkham content lifespan, these were the cards that we were like, the first one's like, do you have a plan for Mindless Dancer? That's kind of like what we said about Circle Undone, because if you don't have a plan for him, you're going to fall apart. Because there's, 3 of him?
There's 3.
And that's crazy. Like, this is a big guy. It's 6'5". They honestly should have made him 4 evade, just because I think 6'5" would have looked nice, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the answer could simply be, I'm never going to let him catch up.
Yep.
It's hard to pull it off, but it can be one of the things you're thinking about. And that means you need extra movement, you need to get clues a little more quickly. Yeah, but it's nice to have something in your back pocket of like, what happens if we do draw this guy and I need to do something?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. There's just a few more tech cards that you have here. We'll cover, I think it was just these 2 we haven't talked about.
Yeah, okay. Right. Protective gear I got out somewhat recently as during my blind play of the Drowned City, I started to realize there were a lot of hazards.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, I have some XP. This is a good card for the campaigns that have a lot of hazards. Why not throw it in? And I was maybe fortunate that the rest of the campaign had more hazards. So I used the hell out of this card. But you have a video, I think from years ago now, that was looking at all the different campaigns, and was Protective Gear a good choice?
Oh,
I think
yeah,
the same thing for Mind Wipe.
Yes, yeah. No, Mind Wipe was just for Dunwich, I think.
Okay.
But had Protective Gear I did. Yeah, no, you're right. And it was, I said, like, Edge of the Earth and Innsmouth. And I guess now Drowned City is going to have a bunch of those, too.
Yeah,
I forgot I made that video. I thought I just had that on my notepad, and I never actually did it.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a good video. So that's like the baby version of Grizzled, which is like, okay, this one cares about one particular trait. This one cares about whichever traits you want. And you can, like, I think the card is, like, fine if you just pick something generically good. Probably, like, Terror and Monster or something elite.
Yeah.
But you can also tech for the campaign you're playing and pick things that are only in that one. You pick Star Spawn and Deep One, you're probably playing Drowned City.
Well, I think I did, yeah, I think, like, yeah, this one, it can be just broadly good, but I think, like, for example, in Circle Undone, I did the trait of the location circle actions were on.
Oh, that's so funny.
And I think I did that with my Eric deck for our blind run of Circle. Well, Eric's blind run of Circle. But, like, yeah, I think it's one of the things that's just broadly good, but you actually can get super focused against campaigns that come up with it. Because I think, yeah, I think they were even spectral, so I think it worked on other things, too. I
so
like
to
it.
Me, it's a card, you know, like a few of these other ones, where I think they're designed to reward scenario knowledge, campaign knowledge.
Yeah.
I think this game is better the more you replay it. I mean, I know it sounds strange coming from people who replay the campaigns a lot, just begging you to play the game more. But I don't know. I think scenario tech is like normal. It feels, and campaign tech, it feels like a thing you're supposed to do to make your deck building more attuned to what the challenges the gamer has to offer. I think that's fine. And Grizzled just tells me you're supposed to do this.
Yep. I agree. Okay. Was there anything we didn't hit on your list, or did we? I think we got it all. I think we covered it pretty well. I guess a good way to close this out, if you don't have anything, is, do you think teching for a campaign is good, and do you think teching for a scenario is also, like, I guess not necessarily a shortcut to Travis actually pulled this out in the Edge of the Earth run we were recording, and it works hard. But again, it's like the same sort of thing where it's like compression, right? But, like, I even tech for standalone scenarios. I'll bring this in Blob whenever we can play it. I'll bring Alter Fate 3 in Blob anytime we play it, right? But I think overall, teching for a campaign, because it's mostly just, like, smoothing out, I think is good, right? I don't think you need to do it, but I think it makes it easier, which I think is fine, because then it allows you to win and have fun while also doing it within the parameters set for you. And I think for the most part, I'm also okay with teching for scenarios, because even after all this is said and done, I think there's really only three things that I tech for in a scenario, like, pretty much in the back of my mind every time I play. And that's the Garden, the Doom of Etsley Entryway, and Ishtaka. Those are the only things that I'll actively always try to have in my deck. I can, like, obviously the Deep One Bull gets there too, but I can just kill this thing. It has 5 health. It dies like anything else. Yeah.
So I guess my little postscript on this is simply that I hope that there's more options that people have to tech, and that's what makes me feel better about it, rather than just saying we've converged on, like, Flying Clothes. You play this every single time you play Path to Carcosa, end of story, right? I get that in the early card pool with literally only 2 cycles, it just made sense. But I hope that that's not what just everyone does all the time.
Yeah.
Because I think that can make the game a little bit stale. And instead, we've got other solutions. Like, it's more interesting to have creative solutions to the same problem, rather than just, again, you play the one thing that is just the best at it all the time. And that's maybe something I feel about the general deck building card pool that we have anyway, that it's more fun to try various things. But, I mean, do we have... we don't necessarily have anything like I'm Out of Here. So I understand the impulse to play this one. It is the best one. These other things are good too, but yeah, now I only play Alessandra and Carcosa, right? Like, how boring would that be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, to your statement of when there's only 2 cycles, you'd play Fine Clothes. I don't think we ever actually did. I think only Bryn did. Both Travis and I were like, nah, which is really funny in retrospect, because now I would be like, yeah. But, you know, like, there's always something to learn with Arkham, which is what makes the game so fun.
And Fine Clothes is great. It's just that, you know, those are 2 tests, you know, that you're reducing down to 0. Like, you should be able to pass those. Unless you can't, right? Again, this Nathaniel Cho deck, if it ever made it past the first scenario, I don't know how he's passing all of those tests. Like, that's too many tests for him to take. But I don't know. Like, I kind of like playing Well Dressed sometimes as a +4.
I like it for Ishtaka.
For dealing with Ishtaka, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Sweet. All right. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I had a great time. I think we covered a lot of great topics in this video, and
hell yeah,
it was a very smooth and quick 90 minutes. It's just blurred right through. Holy hell, everybody. Thanks for watching. I want to say thank you for your support and for all the comments and for everyone who's watching live here as well. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by liking, commenting, subscribing. Make sure you also go follow Daniel's channel as well. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, a GG's.